Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. When someone you love warns you not to embarrass them, pay attention to what they are really protecting. It is rarely your behavior. It is usually their story about you. In this one, my wife didn't just want a peaceful evening. She wanted me to stay in a place that made her feel taller. If you ever hear a partner ranking you against their friends, that is a decision point. You either accept the role they assigned you or you ask who benefits from you shrinking. If you've ever had someone you love talk down to you in public, listen closely, because what happened after my wife said they're on a higher level than you changed everything. Before we jump in, hit like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this, because the moment we walked into that donor dinner, the whole power dynamic flipped. My wife said in the car, like she was reminding me to bring a coat. "Try not to embarrass me," Simone said, eyes on the windshield, fingers tapping the steering wheel in a quick, nervous rhythm. "They're on a higher level than you." I looked out at the Chicago skyline bleeding through a cold, gray dusk and tried to laugh like it was harmless. "I'll try," I told her. The words came out light, but my throat tightened anyway. I could smell her perfume and the sharp citrus of the hand sanitizer she kept clipped to the vent. We were dressed for an evening I hadn't wanted to attend. The invitation was embossed, heavy enough to feel like a judgment in my palm. A donor dinner for the Wickham Arts Initiative, held in a glass building near the river. The kind of place with a doorman who looks like he belongs in a magazine. Simone was on the junior board now. She said junior like it was temporary, like she was already auditioning for something bigger. She'd spent the whole week practicing names, rehearsing laughs, pulling up photos of people I was supposed to recognize. When I asked why I needed to come, she said a couple had canceled. "It matters that I don't show up alone," she explained, like loneliness was a stain. I was a community college instructor, business ethics, organizational behavior, at a campus in St. Louis. I loved my job in a quiet way. I loved students who showed up after double shifts, still asking questions with tired eyes. Simone heard community college and translated it into not impressive. She never said it exactly, not in those words, but she kept trying to fix it with clothing, with dinners, with networking. Before we left the hotel, she'd stare at my tie and said, "That clip looks old." It was old. My grandfather's. I wore it anyway. On the drive from our hotel in the West Loop, Simone corrected details like she was editing a resume. "Do not mention your mother's apartment building," she said, as if an elevator that smelled like bleach would offend someone. "Do not talk about teaching. If they ask, just say you consult." I glanced at her. "I don't consult." She sighed and flicked her eyes toward me. "You do enough. Just keep it broad." I wanted to ask why the truth was dangerous, but I already knew. Truth didn't match the version of me she used when she introduced her life. Simone loved lists. Her phone had lists for everything: restaurants, goals, people to follow, people to avoid. She had a list for this night, too, tucked into a notes app. I watched her scroll while the car waited at a red light, the screen reflecting in her eyes. She was brilliant at performance. She could walk into a room, read it, and become what it wanted. I used to admire that. Lately, it made me feel like a chair she moved when she needed space. When she said higher level, it sounded like a floor I was forbidden to step on. We pulled up to the building. Valet, bright lobby, quiet hum of expensive conversation. Simone handed the keys over without hesitation, like she belonged here by birthright. My shoes clicked on marble that shone like it had never been touched by salt or slush. Somewhere beyond the glass, I could see the river, dark and slow. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and something floral that didn't exist in nature. Simone's hand hooked around my elbow in a way that felt less like affection and more like a grip. "Smile," she whispered, "and please, just be normal." I thought I knew what she meant by normal. Not too eager, not too quiet, not too much. The kind of normal that blends. I'd been doing it for years in her world, at her office holiday parties, at her friends' rooftop birthdays, at brunches where everyone compared vacation plans like currency. I nodded, asked polite questions, and paid attention to whose glass was empty. I became easy to ignore. That was my role, and I told myself it was love. It was compromise. I told myself that because the alternative, that my wife needed me smaller, hurt too much to hold for long. The host met us at the entrance to the private dining room. He was tall, gray at the temples, wearing a suit that fit like it had been tailored by someone who didn't miss. His smile was practiced, but his eyes were alert. "Simone Kincaid," he said warmly, taking her hand. "We're so glad you could make it." She gave him her best professional smile, the one that showed confidence without showing need. Then he turned to me. His gaze paused, sharpened, and something in his face changed like a curtain lifting. "Malcolm Rivers," he said, voice dropping as if he couldn't believe the sound of it. "Is that you?" Simone's grip tightened on my elbow. I felt it. The host stepped closer, not to her, to me. His smile went from polite to personal. "It really is you," he said, and then, to my surprise, he reached out and shook my hand with both of his like I was somebody he was relieved to see. "I have been trying to find you for years." Simone blinked hard. "You know him?" she asked, and the word now came out sharper than she probably intended. The host let out a soft laugh. "Know him? Malcolm saved my organization. He saved my career, if I'm honest." Simone's hand slipped off my arm like it had been burned. She recovered quickly, but the recovery had edges. "That's dramatic," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. The host, Dr. Warren Hargrove, according to the badge on his lapel, tilted his head. "Is it?" He looked at me, as if waiting for me to correct him. I didn't. I just nodded once. My stomach twisted anyway, because recognition wasn't always comfortable. Sometimes it was a door reopening. "Come in," Dr. Hargrove said, gesturing toward the dining room. "They'll want to meet you." The room was all white linens and low lighting, designed to make everyone's skin look smoother, their teeth brighter. On each place setting sat a folded card with a name in elegant script. Simone found hers instantly, like she'd been studying for this. Mine was beside hers, of course, but I noticed something else. The table was arranged so Simone would be within easy reach of the foundation's director and two major donors. This was not random. Simone had planned for proximity. I sat where I was told and watched her shoulders settle into their on position. She leaned toward me and whispered without moving her lips much. "What is he talking about?" I could have answered right then. I could have told her quietly that years ago I'd worked for an ethics office connected to an arts nonprofit that had been bleeding money through contracts that didn't make sense. I could have told her I'd helped Dr. Hargrove document fraud without destroying the entire organization. I could have told her that the mess had involved people with smiles like tonight's smiles, and I had stepped away afterward because I was tired of watching money pretend to be virtue. But I didn't say any of that. Decision one, I stayed silent. Not because I wanted to punish Simone, because I didn't trust her with my story anymore. Dinner began with introductions that sounded like elevator pitches. People said their names, their firms, the boards they sat on, the schools they attended, as if education was a membership card. Simone was flawless. She complimented, laughed softly at the right times, asked questions that made people talk about themselves. When someone asked what I did, Simone jumped in before I opened my mouth. "Malcolm does consulting," she said smoothly. "Operations, compliance, very behind the scenes." She squeezed my knee under the table, a warning disguised as affection. I tasted something bitter at the back of my tongue and took a sip of water. Across from us sat a woman with a sharp bob haircut and glasses that framed her eyes like punctuation. She introduced herself as Paige Ellison, Capital Advisory, in a tone that dared anyone to ask what it meant. Next to her was a man named Cedric Lane, who kept adjusting his cufflinks and checking his phone under the table. Every time someone spoke, Cedric nodded too hard, like agreement was his currency. I notice these things because I'm a teacher. I notice habits. I notice what people do when they're afraid of being seen. Simone, ironically, didn't notice them. She was too busy trying to be them. Halfway through the first course, Dr. Hargrove lifted his glass. "Before we get too far," he said, voice carry without effort. I want to acknowledge a guest who helped keep this initiative alive when it was very close to collapsing. Simone's smile froze in a perfect curve. My heartbeat felt loud. Dr. Hargrove turned his body slightly toward me. Malcolm Rivers, he said, years ago, when our audit showed problems and everyone was scared to touch it, Malcolm took the risk of telling the truth. He did the work without needing credit, and he refused to let the mission be used as cover. The room quieted the way it does when money is listening. Glasses clinked. People looked at me with fresh interest, as if my value had just been updated in their heads. Simone's eyes darted between faces, recalculating. She leaned toward me, lips tight. You never told me this, she whispered. I kept my gaze on my plate. You never asked. I whispered back, and I hated how calm I sounded. It was not a clever line. It was a fact. Simone's laugh was small and strained. He's modest, she said out loud, trying to regain control of the narrative. Dr. Hargrove smiled politely, but he didn't let her steer. He's careful, he corrected. That is different. Questions followed like dominoes falling. Are you still with the state? Someone asked. Did you ever publish that report? Asked another. Paige Ellison leaned forward, eyes sharp. Wait, she said. You're the Malcolm Rivers who wrote the Riverside Compliance Memo? I felt Simone's gaze whip to me. I kept my hand steady on the table. I wrote it, I said. Paige let out a soft sound, half impressed, half alarmed. That memo changed how nonprofits handle procurement, she said. Cedric Lane sat up straighter. I've referenced that, he said quickly, like he wanted to be included in my credibility. Simone's smile was still on her face, but it looked like it was cutting her. She had not known what people knew. She had built a version of me that fit her story. Nice, steady, not flashy, safe to bring into rooms as a background accessory. Now the room was treating me like context, like someone who had belonged here all along. I could see the moment she realized she had misjudged the power dynamics. Her jaw tightened. She reached for her wine and missed the stem slightly, then corrected herself. A small mistake, but it flashed like a crack in glass. After the second course, Simone excused herself to the restroom. She stood too quickly, chair legs scraping softly against the floor. While she was gone, Dr. Hargrove leaned toward me. I'm glad you came, he said, lowering his voice. I heard you'd gone into teaching. I nodded. It suits me, I said. He studied my face. You disappeared, he said, not accusing, just observing. I thought of the old radio in my office back home, the one I restored with my grandfather's tools. How I loved the patience of bringing something back without an audience. I got tired. I admitted. Dr. Hargrove nodded like he understood more than I said. Simone returned with her lipstick refreshed and her eyes a little too bright. She leaned in close, smiling for anyone who might glance our way. What is this? She hissed through her smile. Why are they acting like you are important? I felt heat rise in my chest. Not anger exactly, something like grief. Because I did work, I said quietly. Her smile stayed fixed. You could have told me, she said. You could have prepared me. The word prepared landed wrong. Like I was a presentation she should have rehearsed. Prepared you for what? I asked. For the possibility I wasn't beneath you? Her smile faltered for half a second, then snapped back into place as Cedric Lane asked her about her upcoming fundraiser. The rest of the dinner was a slow tug-of-war between Simone's composure and her panic. She kept jumping into conversations that involved me, trying to soften my answers, trying to translate me back into something manageable. When Paige asked me what I taught, Simone answered, leadership, as if she could elevate with a single word. I corrected it anyway. Decision 2, I told the plain truth. Business ethics, I said, mostly to first-generation students. Paige nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. That is the only place ethics gets taught with any honesty anymore, she said. Simone's laugh was too loud. He's passionate, she said, like passion was an adorable flaw. After dessert, people stood and mingled. Simone's laugh flowed across the room as she spoke to donors, her hand resting on my forearm for display. Then she moved away, leaving her hand behind like she dropped it on purpose. I wandered toward the window wall and looked out at the river. The city lights shimmered on the water like broken jewelry. I remembered being a boy in St. Louis, riding the bus with my mother, listening to her talk about how dignity was not something anyone could give you, only something you guarded. I'd forgotten that lesson in my marriage, little by little, in exchange for peace. Behind me, I heard Dr. Hargrove call my name. "Coffee sometime?" he asked. "No agenda." I nodded. "Yes," I said, and I felt Simone's eyes on my back immediately. In the car afterward, Simone didn't start the engine right away. She sat with both hands on the wheel, staring ahead like she was watching something crash in slow motion. "You made me look foolish," she said finally, voice tight. I turned to her. "How?" I asked. "By existing?" She let out a sharp breath. "Do not do that," she snapped. "Do not act like you don't know what happened." The streetlights washed her face in pale gold. "You let them think you're some kind of authority," she said, and the word sounded like an accusation. "I did not let them think anything," I replied. "They recognized my name. That is not something I controlled." Simone started driving, hands stiff at 10 and 2 like she was trying to prove competence. The city passed by in reflective blur. "You hide things," she said. "You keep your life small. And then you drop something like that, and I'm the one standing there looking unprepared." I stared out the window at a late-night diner, neon flickering, a cook wiping down tables. Unprepared for what, Simone? I asked. She swallowed. "For how people judge," she said. I nodded slowly. "People judge you tonight," I said. "Not because of me, because you treated me like I wasn't worth knowing." Simone's fingers tightened on the wheel. "That is not fair," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word, and for a second she sounded scared. Back at the hotel, Simone moved around the room like she was avoiding certain corners. She took off her earrings and placed them carefully in their case. She always did things carefully when she wanted to feel control. I sat on the edge of the bed and loosened my tie. My tie clip glinted under the lamp, the silver worn smooth where my grandfather's thumb had once rubbed it. Simone stood near the window. "I worked hard to be in that room," she said quietly. "I earned that." I looked at her. "I believe you," I said, "but you didn't want me in that room as your equal. You wanted me as proof you had upgraded." She turned fast, eyes flashing. "That is not what I said." I didn't argue. I just waited. The silence did the arguing for me. The next morning, Simone acted like we could reset with coffee and a schedule. She wanted brunch with another couple from the board. "We can laugh about last night," she said brightly. I felt the old urge to smooth things over, to be easy, but ease was how I'd lost myself. "I'm not going," I said. She paused, mug halfway to her mouth. "Why?" she asked, like she didn't understand refusal inside her life. "Because I'm tired," I said, and it was true in a way she wouldn't want to hear. Her eyes narrowed. "So you're punishing me," she said. "I'm protecting myself," I replied. She scoffed and turned away, and I watched her shoulders lift into that rigid posture again like armor. We drove back to St. Louis that afternoon. The winter light was thin and flat across the highway. Simone spent most of the ride on her phone, sending voice notes, laughing softly at things on the screen. Every time she laughed, I felt farther from her. At a rest stop, she bought a magazine with a smiling couple on the cover. She always liked pictures of what a life should look like. I bought a cup of watery coffee and stood outside in the cold for a minute, letting the wind bite my face like a reminder that I could still feel things. When Simone came back, she said, "You are being dramatic," without looking at me. Something in me went quiet at that word. Back home, the consequences unfolded the way real consequences do. Not in explosions, but in routines that stopped fitting. Simone kept going to her board events. I kept teaching. On Sundays, I still went to my aunt's apartment for our family fish fry tradition. Cornbread, collard greens. The kitchen loud with cousins arguing over spades. Simone used to come sometimes, but lately she called it too much. After Chicago, she stopped coming altogether. "I have deadlines," she'd say. My aunt noticed. "Your wife all right?" she asked one Sunday, handing me a plate. I shrugged. She's busy, I said. My aunt's eyes lingered on my face a second longer than usual, like she was reading between my words. Simone began introducing me differently in public. Not as Malcolm, not as her husband, as an accessory. This is Malcolm, she'd say at her office mixer. He teaches. Very stable. Stable sounded dull. When someone asked what I taught, she jumped into a joke about how I kept kids out of trouble. It was wrong, and she knew it. I told myself she was nervous, that she didn't mean harm. But then she did it again at a friend's birthday dinner in a trendy neighborhood where the restaurant played jazz too loud. Try not to go professor on us, she said with a laugh, and her friends laughed, and I felt my face burn, not from embarrassment at me, but from embarrassment for what she thought love was allowed to look like. Dr. Hargrove called me 2 weeks later. We met for coffee when he was in St. Louis for a conference. The cafe was small, with chipped mugs and a chalkboard menu. I liked it better than the sleek places Simone preferred. Dr. Hargrove asked about my classes, my students, and then he said gently, "Your wife seemed unsettled that night." I stared at my coffee. She likes to manage perception, I admitted, and I did not fit the perception she wanted. Dr. Hargrove nodded, like he'd seen that pattern before. "Be careful," he said. "People who need you small will keep tightening the room around you." I carried that sentence home like a stone in my pocket. Simone found out about the coffee meeting because Dr. Hargrove sent a polite thank you email to my college address, and my phone buzzed during dinner. Simone's eyes flicked to my screen. "You're meeting with him now?" she asked, voice casual but too bright. "He was in town," I said. "We talked." Her fork paused midair. "About what?" she asked. I watched her face, the tiny tension near her mouth. "Teaching," I said. "Work. Life." She set her fork down carefully. "So now you're networking," she said, and the word networking sounded like a claim. "I'm having coffee with someone I respect," I replied. Simone's smile was thin. "Interesting," she said. "You didn't have time to come to my fundraiser planning meeting, but you have time for that." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so perfectly her, measuring my time by what it gave her. The first real argument happened over something small, as they often do. Simone wanted to host a salon at our house. Her word, not mine. She wanted donors and board members to see our living room as proof she had arrived. She pointed at my workbench in the corner where I restored old radios, wires and screwdrivers laid out in careful rows. "That has to go," she said. I stared at her. "It's my space," I said. She waved her hand. "It looks cluttered. It looks cheap." The word cheap felt like a slap. "It's not cheap," I said, voice steady. "It's mine." Simone crossed her arms. "You're being difficult," she said. I realized then that she thought my hobbies were embarrassing, not because they were wrong, because they were not aspirational enough for her audience. I refused to move the bench. Decision 3, though I didn't call it that then. I held my ground, and the air between us changed. Simone held the salon anyway, and she did it without my workbench moving. Instead, she draped a decorative cloth over it like a shameful secret. I came home from grading papers to find our house smelling like catered food, soft music playing, strangers in expensive coats holding wine glasses near my bookshelves. Simone greeted me with a smile that did not touch her eyes. "Just be charming," she whispered as I stepped inside. "Please." It was the same request in a different outfit. I walked through my own home like a guest. A man near the window said, "So you're the husband," and laughed like it was a joke. Simone laughed too quickly. My stomach turned. I went to the kitchen, pulled the cloth off my workbench, and began tightening a screw on an old radio with slow, deliberate calm. The small act felt like breathing. Later that night, after the guests left and Simone collected empty glasses like evidence, she confronted me. "Why did you do that?" she demanded. "You made it weird." I looked at her. "I worked on my radio," I said. She threw her hands up, right in front of them. She snapped, "Like you were making a point." I took a breath. I was in my own house. I said. Simone's eyes filled with something like frustration and fear mixed together. You do not understand what it takes, she said, voice rising. You do not understand what I'm building. I stare at her, and the exhaustion in me surfaced as honesty. I understand, I said quietly. You're building something that does not have room for me unless I behave. Simone's face hardened. You always have to make it about you, she said. The old accusation, the old manipulation, and I felt the stone from Dr. Hargrove's pocket sentence settle heavier in mine. The weeks after that were cold in a different way than winter. Simone stopped touching me unless someone was watching. She started sleeping with her back to me. In the mornings, she played podcasts about high performers while she got dressed, volume turned up as if she wanted the sound to fill the space where we used to talk. I began staying longer at the college, not because I was avoiding her, though maybe I was, but because my classroom felt more honest than my marriage. My students didn't need me to be a symbol. They needed me to be present. One evening, I rode the Metrolink home and watched a man in a work uniform nap against the window, head bobbing with the train's rhythm. I envied the simplicity of his exhaustion. He didn't have to prove anything to anyone. In March, Simone got invited to a weekend retreat in Milwaukee for emerging leaders. She said the phrase like it was a crown. Spouses are welcome for the closing dinner, she told me, after a pause. Not invited, I noticed. Welcome. I didn't want to go. My stomach tightened at the thought of another room full of people measuring us. But Simone's eyes were bright with expectation, and a part of me still wanted to be the husband who shows up. Decision 4, I agreed against my instincts, because I wanted to see if Chicago had been a fluke. I wanted proof that she could see me differently. I wanted to be wrong about what her higher level really meant. Milwaukee was colder than St. Louis, wind cutting off the lake like it had teeth. The hotel lobby smelled like coffee and expensive cologne. Simone walked fast, purposeful, as if she was late for a life she was trying to catch. At the dinner, she introduced me to a woman named Marisol Grant who spoke in precise sentences and never blinked too often. Simone has been telling us about your teaching, Marisol said, eyes flicking over me. Simone smiled. He's very grounded, she said, which again sounded dull. I nodded politely. The room was different from Chicago, less glamorous, more corporate, but the energy was the same. People listening for status in every word. Simone leaned close at one point and whispered, "Please do not talk about your students." I stared at her. "Why?" I asked. "Because it sounds sad," she whispered back. Something inside me cracked. Quietly, on the drive back from Milwaukee, Simone talked about who she met, who she impressed, who she planned to follow up with. Her excitement was real. That made it worse. Somehow, because it meant she wasn't trying to hurt me. She simply didn't notice the harm. When she finally paused, she said, almost casually, "You know, if you wanted to, you could pivot into something bigger." I looked at her. "Bigger than what?" I asked. She waved her hand, impatient. "Bigger than that school," she said. "Something that matches where we're going." There was again, but it didn't feel like we. It felt like a train she was on, and I was expected to run alongside it until I either kept up or fell away. I kept my voice steady. "I like my work," I said. Simone sighed like my contentment offended her. "You're wasting yourself," she said. The word wasting landed like an insult wrapped in concern. The next Sunday at my aunt's fish fry, my cousin Janelle pulled me aside near the stove. "You look tired," she said softly, flipping a piece of fish with practiced ease. "Not work tired. Something else." I stared at the grease popping in the pan. "Simone and I are adjusting," I said, choosing a safe word. Janelle hummed, unimpressed. "Does she still talk to you like your project?" she asked. The question startled me because it was too accurate. "She just wants the best," I said automatically. Janelle gave me a look that felt like a mirror. "Who's best?" she asked. I didn't answer. Outside, kids ran down the hallway, laughing, and for a second I wished I could run too, away from decisions, away from pretending. In April, I got an email from my dean congratulating me on a small grant I'd been awarded for an ethics curriculum project. I was proud, not because it was prestigious, but because it would help my students. I printed the email and taped it near my workbench. That night, I told Simone, expecting, foolishly, a smile. She glanced up from her phone. "That's nice," she said flat. Then, after a beat, she added, "Does it come with extra pay?" I felt something sink. "Not much," I said. She nodded like that settled the value. Later, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing. "He's excited about a little school grant," she said. "It's cute. Cute." The word scraped something raw in me. I stood in the hallway, unseen, listening to my wife reduce my joy into a joke. I confronted her the next day, not with yelling, but with tired honesty. "Do you respect me?" I asked, standing in the kitchen while she packed her lunch in a neat, color-coded container. Simone blinked like the question was inconvenient. "Of course I do," she said quickly. "Why are you asking that?" I held her gaze. "Because you keep shrinking me," I said. Simone's face tightened. "I do not shrink you," she snapped. "You shrink yourself. You're comfortable. You don't push." I swallowed hard. "I push," I said, "just not where you want me to." Simone slammed the fridge door a little harder than necessary. "I cannot carry both of us socially," she said, voice sharp. "I need you to meet me." I stared at her. "Meet you where?" I asked. "In rooms where I'm only allowed to exist if I perform?" Simone rolled her eyes. "You always twist things," she said. And I realized she truly believed that. That night, I slept on the couch. Not as punishment, but as distance. The living room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock Simone insisted on keeping, because it looked classic. I lay under a thin blanket and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Chicago, about Dr. Hargrove's hands around mine, about the way recognition had shocked Simone like an interruption. I thought about my grandfather, how he used to fix radios while humming gospel hymns under his breath, patient and steady, never performing for anyone. He used to tell me, if someone loves you, they don't make your spirit ask permission. I hadn't thought about that sentence in years. It came back now, clear as a bell. In the morning, Simone stepped over me like furniture, not even pausing. In May, Simone invited me, instructed me, to attend another donor event, this time in St. Louis at a renovated theater downtown. "It's important," she said. "People will notice if you're not there." I stared at her. "People," I repeated. "Or you?" Simone's eyes flashed. "Do not do this," she warned. I felt the familiar pull to comply, to keep things smooth. But smoothness had become suffocation. "Decision 5, I said no. "I'm not going," I told her quietly. Simone stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You're going to embarrass me," she said, voice rising. I almost laughed at the irony. "You already told me I embarrass you," I said. "So at least let me do it honestly." Simone's face tightened into something cold. "Fine," she said. "Stay small." The words hung in the air, ugly and revealing. I felt my hands go numb. Simone went to the event alone. She came home late, heels in her hand, mascara slightly smudged from either exhaustion or something she wouldn't name. She didn't speak to me at first. She walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and I heard drawers opening and closing fast. When she finally came out, she stood in the hallway with her arms crossed. "They asked about you," she said, voice flat. I covered, like always. I watched her, and I felt a strange calm. "You shouldn't have to cover for your husband," I said. Simone's eyes narrowed. "If you would just be strategic," she snapped. "If you would just stop acting like you're above caring." "I'm not above caring," I interrupted, surprised by my own firmness. "I'm tired of caring only in the direction you approve." Simone stared at me, breathing hard. Then she said the sentence that finally made everything undeniable. "I married you because I thought you'd be easy," she said. Her mouth snapped shut immediately, like she hadn't meant to say out loud. But it was out now, and I couldn't put it back. I didn't leave that night. Not because I forgave her, because leaving is complicated, because we own a house together, because my name was on bills, because part of me still grieved the woman I thought she was. I spent the next week moving through routines like a man carrying a fragile object he was afraid to drop. I taught my classes. I graded papers. I nodded when Simone talked about her day. But inside, something had shifted. I began opening a separate bank account. Quietly, I began gathering documents, mortgage papers, insurance, the kind of paperwork love usually makes invisible. I felt ashamed doing it, like preparation was betrayal. But I remembered Simone's word, prepared. I decided I would prepare myself this time. In June, we sat across from each other at a small table in a public coffee shop near Forest Park. I chose the place because it was neutral and because the baristas didn't treat anyone like they were special. Simone arrived dressed as if she were meeting an executive, not her husband. She placed her purse on the chair beside her like a barrier. "I've been thinking," she said, voice controlled. We both contributed to the tension. "I waited," she continued. "You have a habit of withholding, and I have a habit of pushing." She looked at me like she expected that to count as an apology. "Why did you say they were on a higher level than me?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. Simone blinked, annoyance flickering. "Because you don't understand that world," she said. "And I didn't want you to say something that made me look bad." I felt my throat tighten. "So you were protecting yourself," I said. Simone's jaw clenched. "I was protecting us," she corrected. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "You were protecting your image from your husband." Simone leaned forward, voice sharpening. "You're being dramatic," she said, again. It hit me like a bell. She would never call it what it was. I told her I wanted separation. The words tasted like metal in my mouth. Simone stared at me, stunned, then angry. "Over one sentence?" she snapped. I didn't flinch. "Over pattern," I said. The sentence was just the clearest version. Simone's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away quickly, like tears were weakness. "So you're just quitting," she said. "You're abandoning this because it got hard." I swallowed. "It didn't get hard," I said. "It was honest." Simone scoffed. "You'll regret this," she said. "You'll realize you threw away a life that could have been elevated." I stared at her, and I felt the grief in me rise like a wave, but behind it was something steadier. "I don't need my life elevated," I said. "I need it respected." Simone looked at me as if she couldn't understand that language. And maybe she couldn't. We separated in July. Simone moved into a downtown apartment with a view she posted on social media. Her captions were carefully vague. Growth, alignment, new seasons. I moved into a smaller rental near my campus. A quiet place with creaky floors and neighbors who wave without trying to extract value from me. I brought my workbench and my grandfather's tools. The first night there, I set the radio I'd been restoring on the table and turned it on. Static. Then a faint jazz station, then clarity. The sound filled the room, and I realized how long it had been since my own space had felt like mine. Simone texted about logistics, mail, utilities. Who got what? She never texted, "I'm sorry," and I stopped waiting for it. Over the next months, I noticed changes in myself, small but real. I stopped checking my phone during conversations. I laughed more with my students. I started going to Saturday morning men's group at a local church, not because I needed religion, but because I needed grounding. The older men, they didn't care about titles. They cared about whether you showed up, whether you kept your word, whether you knew how to apologize. One Saturday, an older man named Mr. Daniels listened to me talk about Simone's higher-level comment and said quietly, "A spouse is supposed to be your home, not your stage manager." That sentence settled into me like a truth I had been dodging. I began seeing how many times I'd excused disrespect as ambition. In November, I ran into Simone by accident at a grocery store in Clayton. She was wearing a coat that looked expensive and a scarf arranged perfectly. She saw me near the produce, holding a bag of oranges, and her face did something complicated. Surprise, calculation, maybe regret. "Malcolm," she said, voice smooth, "you look good." I nodded. "You too," I said, because I wasn't trying to be cruel. She glanced at my cart. Simple groceries, no performance. "So," she said, hesitant, Are you happy? I thought about my small apartment, my radio playing jazz, my students emailing me thank yous, my aunt's fish fry laughter, my own voice returned to my mouth. I'm peaceful, I said. Simone's smile tightened. Peaceful, she repeated, as if tasting a word she didn't value. Well, she said, adjusting her scarf, I hope you find someone who fits your level. It was meant to sting, but it didn't, because I finally understood something I should have known the night in Chicago. The problem was never my level. It was her need to rank love at all. If you made it to this point, you understand the truth. Disrespect doesn't always yell. It sometimes whispers in a nice outfit. If this story hits you, like it. Share it with someone who needs permission to stop shrinking, and subscribe for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, which line was a deal breaker for you? Higher level, stay small? Or, I married you because you'd be easy? I think about 3 moments more than the rest. Simone warning me in the car, her draping a cloth over my workbench, and her admitting she married me because she thought I would be easy. None of those were little things. They were data. When someone asks you to shrink so they can shine, that is not partnership. It is management. I don't tell this story to make Simone a villain. I tell it because I ignored the early signals and called it patience. If a relationship requires you to edit yourself for someone else's audience, the cost eventually comes due to Yendi.